by a heroic female police officer. You see some of the footage of the immediate aftermath right there, including the woman running with the child, 4-year-old child, shot, broad daylight, Times Square, middle of New York City, okay? Is New York finally seeing the reality in front of our face that's playing out all across the country in similar cities? When you look at the crime databases, when you look at homicides and murders, there's a very clear trend here. Let's look into these statistics a little bit. Here with reaction, we have the president of the Crime Prevention Research Center, John Lott. John, always good to see you.
Great to talk to you again, Buck.
So let's just start with, what kind of increase in crime are we seeing? I mean, you can give me national, you give me city, but the top cities. How bad is this? Put this into some historical context for us.
Well, we don't have all the crime data yet in from the FBI, but it's pretty clear that there are record increases in homicide and murder that occurred last year. And so far this year, Los Angeles, New York, Chicago are going to be at least as high as they were before. This isn't a mystery about what's happening. I mean, you had jails and prisons across the country releasing inmates in places like Los Angeles and San Francisco. Over half the inmates were being released. You had police being ordered to stand down. You had police budgets being cut in New York City. Over $1 billion was cut there. You had prosecutors in places like Los Angeles refusing to prosecute violent criminals. Same in Chicago and other places. This isn't rocket science. If you make it so that you don't arrest criminals, and you make it so that you don't prosecute the criminals that you arrest, guess what? It's a lot less risky for criminals to go and commit crimes. In places like Chicago, before last year, the arrest rate for murder was down below 20%. It's probably near 10% this last year, and you have an even lower rate for gang murders. And of course, not all those people who are arrested end up being convicted. So if you're talking about single-digit rates of having people being convicted for murder and who are involved in gangs in a place like Chicago, is it really surprising that with that low of a risk for criminals, you're going to see a lot more gang fights and gang killings?
Now, John, we have the New York City crime statistics as of April 2020 versus April 2021. Shootings up 166%, grand larceny up 66%, felony assault up 35%. I mean, these are numbers that in normal times, John, and I mean, I worked at one point in my life at the NYPD, you would have police commissioners fired and you'd have mayors that were constantly worried about their jobs. But it seems like this isn't really a news story that gets a whole lot of attention at the national level. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's changed administrations. I mean, you've had it so that, police, it's hard to go and hire police in different parts of the country. The quality of police is declining along with everything else. This is a real crisis that's occurring. But Democrats just want to go and blame the lack of gun control. When Biden was speaking about gun control a few weeks ago, he was blaming the increase in homicides this last year on gun control. I'd like one reporter to ask the administration to point to any change that occurred in gun control last year that could explain the huge spikes that we had. Again, as I said, this isn't difficult to go and understand, but for some reason, the administration refuses to go and talk about the obvious issues that are here with regard to law enforcement.
John, just give me a sense of some of the areas. I mean, you mentioned that Biden speech. I know you've told me before that there were just a lot of things that Biden said in his address to a joint session of Congress, which was just a few weeks ago now, on the gun control issue. I mean, you're right. They blame police violence somehow while crime is going up all across the country. We have all this focus from BLM on defunding police, on law enforcement as the issue, which is just completely counterintuitive, unreasonable, and really damaging. But also they like to put in the gun control issue here. What are some of the ways that you feel Joe Biden was just being dishonest or flat out lying about gun control when he gave that speech?
I stopped counting at 24 different lies that he made there. I wrote up 2 pieces that covered 12 of them. But, even the media was forced to go and admonish him on at least a couple of the claims, like the claim that you can't go and sue gun makers and gun sellers. I mean, is this serious stuff? I mean, if a gun maker or gun seller sells a defective gun and somebody's harmed, they can get sued. If a gun maker or gun seller sells a gun without going through the proper background checks or breaking the law, they can get sued. What they want to try to do is completely change the type of litigation that occurs, the type of liability. They want to make gun makers and gun sellers liable for any harm that occurs from the gun. Could you imagine applying that to cars? I mean, there are 4.5 million people each year who require medical attention because of car accidents. Should all those people sue for pain and suffering, for lost wages, for medical care? What do you think would happen to the car industry if somebody who's talking to somebody and not paying attention to driving is able to sue Ford Motor for all those costs? Do you think many of the car companies would be put out of business? You look at some of the other things that were being made there about the background checks. They constantly claim that there are 3 million or 3.5 million dangerous people that have been stopped from buying guns because of background checks. That's simply false. What they should say is there have been 3.5 million initial denials, and something around 99% of those are mistakes. It's one thing to stop a felon from buying a gun. It's another thing to stop somebody simply because they have a name similar to a felon from buying a gun. I was just working in the Department of Justice, and I saw some data that indicated that the mistake rate for black males is more than 3 times their share of the population. For Hispanics, it's slightly less than that. There's no reason why these mistakes should occur, but Democrats won't talk about trying to fix these mistakes. When you have
So you're telling me that disproportionately Black and Latino legal, lawful American citizen gun buyers are actually denied by the background check system unfairly?
That's exactly right. I mean, the basic problem is, you fill out the 4473, you put down your name, your social security number, your address, your birthday, your race, your eye color. You think they're using all that information. What they usually use is roughly phonetically similar names and similar birthdays. People tend to have names similar to others in their racial groups. Hispanics have names similar to other Hispanics. Blacks have names similar to other blacks. 33% of black males, for example, are legally prohibited from owning guns because of past felony records. Whose roughly phonetically similar names are their names being confused with? Other law-abiding, good black males who want to go and buy a gun to protect themselves and their family.
This is discrimination that you're not going to be hearing about from the corporate media, but that's why we bring it to you here on The First. John, thank you for your work and your research on this. Always appreciate it.
Thank you. People can find more at our website at crimeresearch.org. Thank you very much.
crimeresearch.org. Check it out, everybody.